way we do this. The way we make this smokeless is actually by burning from the top down. So it's the complete opposite of how everyone is taught on how to light a fire. And that's why most fire is considered, creates a lot of smoke and emissions. Most people are unaware of this, but smoke is actually a gas that can be burned cleanly. So I like to think of this like how you have your stove in your kitchen. The gas comes out of the stove, it ignites, you see no smoke above. We're going to do basically kind of the same thing. The smoke is the gas coming from below. The flame's going to be on top. It's going to burn cleanly in that flame front, and then it'll pretty much create a smokeless fire. You'll see a little bit of smoke here and there, especially in the beginning and the end. And then on top of that, we are dealing with less than perfect materials because I got them from some mulch. So they might have a little bit of moisture and stuff. So there's things like that. Those are some variables to keep in mind. Another variable is this burn setup. It's a little bit different than what I normally use. So all these variables, you kind of, as you're getting used to your setup, you'll dial it in a little bit more. But really, the kind of the main rule of thumb is you want to complete. I call it kind of like your fire cap. You want the whole thing to be engulfed in flame on top. If you have a fire burning over here and over here there's no fire burning, you will actually see that smoke escaping out that little hole essentially because there's nothing to burn it cleanly. So we're gonna start. Did somebody want to come and help out? We're just gonna actually I can use the second person too. Yeah, let's grab these logs. Let's strategically put them in so that there's not a lot of airspace. I mean, there's going to be some airspace, but we don't want it to have tremendous amounts of airspace. Yeah, perfect. Because if you have too much airspace, that creates gaps where things don't burn necessarily, and then the smoke ends up escaping.
What's the ideal conditions? Do you need to put it on the ground, or would you always put it in like a container?
You can do either or technically. I wouldn't say there's an ideal condition. It's just that when you're using different situations, you might have to make tiny adjustments. But the premise is pretty much always the same in the sense that you're putting your big materials on the bottom, you're putting your smaller materials on top, and you're lighting from the top down. It's just that like one variable that we came across in Sacramento recently that I'd never run into because I hadn't used that style of burn, and we're going to be using a torch to light this. I was attempting to use a torch. The lid on the perimeter, like the edge, was so high because I was limited on how much kindling I could bring. It was so high from the kindling that I almost had to put the tank into the barrel, which is super unsafe. So you want to make sure that if you're going to use a barrel, you have enough material to really get it close to that top edge, because otherwise you don't want to put your tank into the right over the flame. So give me 1 second while they're finishing up this real quick, which they're doing a great job of, and I'm going to grab the propane tanks. It's okay. I honestly kind of like doing it in different instances because it's a learning kind of thing for all of us. So I prefer to kind of learn because, I mean, everyone is going to have, and it's cool too because if there is some failures, then I can talk us through it rather than you take it home and you only have this one type of setup that you can use. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, now I'm screwed. I can't do this. So you can do it. So let's just kind of make mistakes together. So if everyone wants to look, they did a great job of stacking materials. There's very little air spaces. The small...
I don't think
there's no screen at the bottom.
It's sitting up off of the barrel.
Yes.
Solid metal. Okay, then there's no
But it's sitting up on top of it. It's like a charcoal thing. So there's a screen down here holding it up from the bottom.
Okay.
So there
Is
is
there
air
metal under the screen?
There's metal underneath there.
Oh, okay.
So it's a solid bottom, but there's just like a slight lift on the bottom allowing for some air movement.
For air movement.
Oh,
Which could mean it could start to like suck down.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Or something.
So yeah, if we see
So you notice how we have a pocket here a little pocket there. We're gonna make sure to stuff our kindling into those pockets, and we really want to try to limit the pockets essentially. So, anyone else want to help us get kindling in here? Is it same people or? So when we start burning with a torch like this, so this is how I start the fire. I don't want to pour any chemicals on it, but I always start from the center and then I work my way out. Because one thing I've learned is I was actually starting from the edge, and then you start working forward. And luckily I never blew up. But I learned once I started getting that close, I realized I was like, this is a bad idea.
So you wouldn't put like any paper in the center and then light the paper and then let that go? You always
if your material is dry enough, which it should be, fingers crossed, you should be good to go. The torch does a pretty good job. So yeah, let's get started with burning it, and as it's cooking down, we can continue asking questions. We can, if you feel more comfortable with that, we can. Well, I'm all about making people comfortable. I don't think it's gonna make too much of a difference, but I mean, not in terms of like safety, but in terms of the burn. So I think that it's okay. We can do that. I've never seen anything fly off from this style of fire before, but I'm still okay with being safe. So we can put it over. It is another variable to consider. But if you notice, like, look how much smoke's coming out the top. And you notice where the smoke escapes is from the edge where there's no fire, right? Okay, I'm gonna work over here before I grow, because you can see the fire's blowing this way. So I'm gonna try to finish it sooner rather than later, so I don't have to put my tank right in front of that flame.
So are you spending so much time lighting it rather than letting it combust itself because you want it to happen all pretty much simultaneously?
We want a complete flame cap. So if I just light the center and walk away, it's gonna burn super uneven, and then we're not gonna get the end result we want.
And the air circulates away from the flames underneath and the smoke and the escapes, which is up before.
So it takes a little bit to light. This is where primarily, I guess, some of the emissions come from the torch. So you got to keep that into your consideration. Touching my tank, making sure it's not getting too hot. If it's burning my hands, then it's definitely getting too hot. I'm doing all right so far.
Long and nozzle.
I agree. Actually, that's a good point. So it is starting to burn my hand right there. Thank you, Wayne.
Well, okay, you're in like this like vortex area where the wind is always shifting down here.
Yep. So another thing I typically like to do is, if I can, I like to have an area where I'm gonna chase the air away from the fire. I'm gonna use the wind to my advantage right now. So it's blowing that way, I'm gonna hit over here. Sorry, I forgot what I was gonna say before that. It's getting really warm.
I don't know, you have a lot of kindling there, and I was like, this thing is gonna get very big for a second, and that's why I was like, you should probably cover it. Isn't there boys flying off of it? But I'm curious, I've never seen a fire with just kindling like this burning. And it's such a small time, so it's kind of cool to see how it reacts.
I mean, so look at the smoke, right? Or lack thereof. starting to get a little warm. I'm gonna change tanks real quick just because this one's getting a little warm. And sometimes you don't, when it's lit like this, you don't have to fully light it. You just maybe have to char it a little bit, blacken it. Backing off, I don't want to get into the fire. But I mean, so you can see that white smoke, but for the most part, there's not much of it actually escaping. But it's still burning pretty clean. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. I mean, most people have seen fires with a lot of smoke, right? And it's just not fun to be near. There is some escape happening. Yeah.
Out of the holes.
Yeah. So exactly. So you notice that it skips. So that may be a reason why you may not want a burn thing like this. So this is it's a good example of maybe what you wouldn't want. So you can lower your pollution by having, because I've done this with just solid burn, like just a solid ring essentially, and it burns way cleaner. But it's still really good overall. I mean, there is some smoke emitting again from the sides, but it's not too bad. The fire feels pretty good, especially for my tummy. I hasn't been happy. Any other questions?
It looks like
For adding the char to the piles. So when you're putting it on top, you want to put it underneath your mulch layer, and then when you're at the base of your pile, would you want to put it on top of the mulch layer? At the base?
Underneath the compost pile, you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you could, on the bottom, I don't think it really matters too much. You could put it on top of or below them. I think it's totally okay. I was thinking when I was talking about putting on top of the soil, I was thinking more like next to a tree or a plant or something. But if you're doing it for compost, the goal is the stuff that's leaching out to travel through that char. It's going to trickle through that organic material layer into the char, or it's also going to trickle. It's going to hit that char before it hits the mulch. Either way, it's going to hit that char, so you'll be cool. I definitely, though, on top, I'd like to put it underneath that organic layer, just especially because it's really light, and any dust and things like that can any wind could potentially blow some of the particulates away. But yeah, that's not usually going to be a main issue. I would probably put it underneath my organic layer, so that's kind of where I would put it. I think it would look a little bit cleaner too. And another part of like doing community spaces is a nice finished, attractive kind of site, so that more people, because there's so many different perspectives when you come into community sites, and you want as many as possible to be happy with your end product, so that you can incorporate more participation. So having a finished cap of wood chips, I think, would look a little bit nicer. But I mean, you can experiment as long as you have the char on top. It's going to be capturing from above. And again, so roughly, you preferably for something like this, 25 foot. I don't think it's exactly 25 foot. I don't know. Maybe it's pretty close actually. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't measure, but you pretty much want about a 25 foot spacing from the edge of your fire to any kind of consumables. And then always, like you saw before, everything is thoroughly wet down just in case. If you're going to do large scale, 100 foot. You want to really have a big. So I probably wouldn't do a large scale burn here. If you really wanted, if it was in those winter months where things are a lot more moist, you can do bigger. But yeah, if it's in the dry periods, you want to be very conscientious of that 100 foot rule. For sure. Check it out. If you notice right here on top, it's black. It's whitening, but there's still, see that black center right there? We're kind of watching that and waiting. I want to see that black center be dominantly white. There can be a couple black specks in there, but it has to be mostly white. Otherwise, we put it out too early, and then you just don't end up with a fully carbonized material.